Sean Grogan, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Pat.
All right, let's start at the beginning here. Where did you grow up, Sean?
I grew up in central Jersey, Edison, New Jersey. People will tell you there's no central Jersey, that there's only a north and a south. But those are the people that live in the extremes. Those of us that grew up in central Jersey, Addison, Woodbridge area, we understand there actually is central Jersey.
So is this I'm not very familiar with Jersey, but I flew into Newark this summer just as a layover. And yeah, I wasn't terribly impressed with Newark, but
and I hear that around the country with all the traveling I do. It's the worst airport in the US, in my opinion. And I've heard that around the country. I just landed yesterday, and you land there early, a few minutes. You're like, oh, I'm here, I'm early. But no, you're going to wait 20 minutes before a gate even opens.
right.
Never mind the treatment from the TSA there, which usually talk to you like you're a piece of trash. And then I was in San Antonio, and they're like, "Oh, how you doing today, sir? Hey, have good holidays." And oh, I see your birthday. Oh, I see on your license you're a veteran. Oh, thank you for. I'm like, whoa, you're supposed to yell at me, tell me to put my stuff in a container. And I'm sure you had probably a similar experience at your time in Newark.
Yeah, it wasn't. I'll just say it wasn't my favorite place to go. So it's like, all right, well, so be it. So you grew up in Jersey, and you went to high school there. And when did you go straight into the Marine Corps right after?
No, I waited 6 months. I was actually 17 years old when I graduated.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, my father would have definitely signed for me to go. He was in the Marines himself in the
Oh, okay.
early 70s. Yeah, 1970. I went into Paris Island March 2001, and my kneecap popped out. So I ended up spending 6 months there. That was a lot of fun in Paris Island.
Oh,
Being
yeah.
injured.
What a vacation that was.
Yeah, they don't care that you're injured. They pretty much have you sit on a footlocker, read military knowledge. I crunched around and cleaned. And I was actually on a part called the Crucible right before you get your Eagle, Globe, and Anchor to become Marine when 9/11 happened. So I was
Wow.
in Paris Island. I didn't even know what really happened when I was there. And, being from Jersey, we could see the Twin Towers from areas near my house in a distance. And to
Yeah.
have that happen, it was really, it was pretty crazy because I didn't know what really happened. I thought they were playing mind games with us at first.
Yeah, just for full disclosure, Sean and I went out for drinks when he was in Wisconsin. I think it was in October.
Yep.
Yeah, and we were talking about that. My brother was in the Marine Corps, and they kept on drilling into their heads that we're at war. That was in the 80s during the Cold War.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, Russia's invading. You're going to Moscow. You're, blah, blah, blah. And he said him and everybody else there was convinced we were at war with Russia.
Oh yeah, and that's what you've heard. Those stories used to take place. They'd have them say North Korea invaded. So
Yeah.
I'm like, they actually walked over to us in the middle of an exercise we were doing. Hey, listen up, gather around. They said, listen, two planes hit the World Trade Center in New York City. One hit the Pentagon. One's missing. Train harder. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's, And they actually got to the point they had a truck nearby, a pickup truck I heard something about Port Authority, which the Port Authority handles all the bridges and tunnels in New York, New Jersey.
Mm.
And in my mind, I remember thinking, wow, they really took this to the next level. They're playing a cassette about Port Authority and this attack.
They're messing with you. So you graduate from boot camp eventually. And how long were you in the Marine Corps active?
I did 6 years reserve. I was activated.
Oh, okay.
I was activated for Iraq in 2005. I did one tour in Al-Anbar province.
Okay. What was your MOS there?
I started out, I was artillery. I was
Okay.
motor transportation running convoys when I was in Iraq in Al-Anbar.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where did the whole police thing come from? Why? Where did that come from?
It wasn't something I always wanted to do. And that's where it's, when you go for the police interviews, like, oh, how long have you wanted to be a cop for? And most people, oh, since I was a kid, for my whole life.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, well, it's a couple of years now. They're kind of taken back. I was working as a laborer for a water company, which was a good, steady job. But a lot of the guys I was in Iraq with that were in the reserve unit, they all became cops. It was like half that reserve unit became cops.
Sure.
They were talking about, it was such a good job. They loved it. And then a couple guys I worked with the water company that I was in Iraq, they became cops. And I'm like, well, look into this. It's a pretty decent job. Ended up loving it. It was, that you're younger, running and gunning in
Oh
the
yeah.
20s. Yeah. So it was, adrenaline rushes and things like that. It was pretty cool. And you had that camaraderie that you were missing. I worked with a lot of good guys at the water company that were laborers too, but you don't have that same camaraderie that you have as a cop
Oh,
or in the
absolutely.
in the Marines.
So you get this interest in becoming a police officer. How many places did you apply for, or did you just go for the one that you were working at, or what did that look like?
I put in Jersey, you take the civil service test, and if you
Oh,
live in a civil service town, they'll send you a certification letter. You have to write back and let them know you want to work there. So I received for them. I was actually hoping to get in the sheriff's, even though the pay was a lot less, but they had a canine unit, and I loved working. I did a dog sport known as Schutzen, which is means like protection dog in German, and
mhm.
you get the dog to track, apprehend, bite on a sleeve, and
Yeah.
also obedience is a large part of it. And I really loved working with dogs, so I would have, because the sheriff's department had a canine unit, I would have taken that over the higher paying where I
Mm.
went. It just happened that, hey, I got something back from Woodbridge, got hired there, so I went there.
Yeah, canine is that has to be one of the most desired jobs, within a police department. A lot of coppers are like, yeah, I want to be canine. It's very competitive and it's highly sought after. And the 25 years that I was in Milwaukee, when I first started, I think we had like 3 dogs, which was unusual. It was pretty small. And then another chief came in and he completely got rid of the program and we got horses instead. So the big joke was like, yeah, we got like dope sniffing horses, and whatever. They have their role and they're great to move a crowd. Those beasts are huge. Oh my God. I'm from Chicago, I don't know jack about that stuff. And we moved to Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin when I was in high school. And I had a buddy that lived on a farm, but he didn't have any horses. So I never saw any like up close before, except for going like to like a fair or something like that. And you see them in action, you're like, holy cow, they are some formidable beasts. There's no doubt about that. But then we got a different chief, and that chief is like, yeah, we need a canine unit. So they beefed up the canines to about, I think, 12 dogs.
Oh, okay.
So that was pretty cool. What department did you wind up working? Where'd you go?
Woodbridge Police. It's
How
in
big of a department would that be?
it was a population around 100,000, a little over, and we had around 220
Okay.
cops. So I guess what you consider a medium-sized
Yeah.
department compared to your large cities, and definitely not your 10 officer, which is good. You kind of know everybody till new cops come on. You're like, who is that over there? It's like,
Okay, so obviously you start out in patrol. That's where pretty much everybody starts out. Then what was your career path? Where'd you go?
I went into narcotics. It was a special investigations unit focusing on narcotics. We would handle other things as well that the regular detective bureau couldn't handle because we were in plain clothes all the time. And then while I was in there, I think I was in for about a year and a half, 2 years. I got the canine, and it was the only dog in the agency. They had canines in the past, I think 10, 15 years before that, and they just let the program phase out, which happens, depending on who's in
Sure.
charge
Yep.
over the
Money.
years,
Yeah.
money. And, the thing is, though, with the narcotics detection dog, a lot of the seizures can pay for it. And then even the seizure money that we had from the past from drug
Right.
dealers paid for the dog, paid for the car, paid for, the canine vehicle, the initial leashes, all those things, which a lot of people, I think, don't realize. It depends on who your chief is, to your director, your
Yep.
sheriff, whether they
Absolutely.
like dogs. So you said getting rid of the dogs into the horses. I always said if I was a chief or a director somewhere, I would have the largest canine unit you can get your hands on and the horse. Anything you could do, if you use the seized money, it can produce more seized money with the narcotics dog, not with the explosives, but with the narcotics.
Yeah. There's always that fight for money, asset forfeitures, you know, most city budgets, their biggest drain besides education is police and fire. You're always trying to get a piece of that pie and you're always trying to get more money out of, whoever. And yeah, it's a never ending battle with that. It just, yeah, it kind of sucks. And it's not always what's best for the department and what's best for the community. It's what looks, it's optics as well. With the dogs, that particular chief thought, they were scary looking, they're German shepherds. We can't have those.
Yeah, and it's a shame because, like you said, what's best for the community. Now, I had a single purpose narcotics dog, and the county that I work in had 800,000 people, over 800,000, and the sheriffs only had a handful of dogs for explosives and one narc dog at the time. This is why it was easy to sell to the agency. Hey, we need a
Sure.
narc dog and narcotics. But even, the patrol, meaning dual purpose, where it can track. Now, that was very limited in our county, 800,000 plus people. If we had a burglary or a robbery, it was kind of like, all right, we're going to go find them. There wasn't really very often the thought to call the canine. Sometimes I would reach out to the supervisor. Hey, do you want to call a canine for this? Whereas in other counties in New Jersey, where they had 20 something dogs for the sheriff's department, the little towns knew, or the big cities as well. Hey, wait, get a perimeter. We'll get the canine to track. It's such a tool. Could you imagine telling someone that was just robbed, hey, yeah, we didn't call a dog because it's just not what we do here?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
it's we don't do that here. It's just not something. Mean, if you have that, even to call another county, because we did that a lot as well. We would call other counties before we had the dog. You should have that mutual aid where you can reach out and provide this to citizens, especially victims of crimes.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the last foot chases that I was in charge of on the street on a day shift was an armed robber. It was actually two armed robbery guys that were hitting cell phone stores. And it was on the fringe of the city that I worked in and a suburb. And it was just a crew. They were going around from literally, store to store to store, wearing the same clothes, same car. I mean, it doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to figure out who the hell is doing this shit. And we had a really good perimeter set up on this block. That means there's cops, on every corner, in the middle, everywhere. And they're like, hey, Sarge, we're going to start making the yards. And I'm like, okay, well, a dog would be a good idea. And I think even before I said that, this is a little while ago, the canine came up on the air and says, hey, do you need some help, Sarge? I'm like, yeah, bring Fido. That's outstanding. So within 10 minutes, they found him hiding under a dumpster.
It's,
And that's an area where there was a zillion cops had already walked by.
Isn't that crazy? And that's the thing. It's such a tool. It's
Yep.
I look at, obviously, animals. I'm an animal lover as well, but
Right.
You look at it as a tool as far as being able to help the community solve crimes. The shepherds, the fresh, something like that. Someone's hiding right there, and you're missing them, right? And we're not able to see. And you've got I don't know. Do they have blood mounds in Milwaukee as well?
Blood mounds. What is that?
Bloodhounds.
Oh, bloodhounds. No,
Yeah.
no, no. We do not.
Okay, because those, we didn't have them where I was, but I trained with the county I live in now. They have one, and I saw one of the guys, actually I was in Iraq with too. He works for this agency as a handler, and
Yeah,
he just got a bloodhound, and those things are amazing.
that's
That
what
they,
I've heard.
oh my God, to train, because I've gone to scent school with a guy, and they'd be like, hey, can you run a track for me on concrete, on asphalt, and then 2 hours later, able to follow exactly where I went, and then run up to me out of 3 or 4 other people and say, that's the guy right there, and jump up on. I'm like, this is insane.
Yeah, that's nuts. But I've also had it where, I mean, dogs are not 100%. I had a break in into like a 4-family apartment complex, and I called for a canine because the guy was supposed to still be in there. So the canine tracks, from stem to stern, blah, blah, blah. And the cops, after the canine tracks, they also look for this guy, and we can't find him. It's like, well, obviously he got out. I'm probably 3 blocks away. I'm 10-8. And I hear the one copper that's there screaming in the microphone, he's here, he's here. And I'm like, no shit. So everybody, scoots back, and there he was under the stairs in just a real good hiding spot. I mean, it was just like a real good cubby. So that's happened to me twice where I've called for a canine, they've searched, but like 90 some percent, they always get them.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, nothing's 100%. Even with the shepherds as well, it's got to be explained to me more of a fresh track. Whereas it's if the time's gone too long, there's other disturbance from cops coming
Mm-hmm.
around. Where with the bloodhound, they can eliminate the man. It was explained to me. I'm familiar with that. They'll line up all the cops that were on scene and say, nope, they're actually smelling like a
No
specific.
kidding.
Oh yeah,
Wow.
they're like if so you got, let's say you got someone bail on a car, they
Yeah.
bring and you've got one of the guys that bailed on a car, you already arrested him. The cops that were in the area, they'll line you guys up with them and have the bloodhounds smell all them, so they know that's not who they're tracking.
So it's like an elimination photos or prints, in an investigation. Yeah, it's like this is the elimination people, Mr. Bloodhound guy. Oh God,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah, it's pretty cool the stuff they do, and especially for missing children and things
Oh
like
yeah,
that as well. With they'll actually have them bring the underwear of the child if possible, because get the
yeah.
most scent, and
Okay.
then they say, okay, this is what I'm looking for. They know this
Wow.
is the exact scent of the human, whereas the shepherd, from my understanding, with the dual purpose handlers and trainers I dealt with, they're tracking disturbance. So you ran through a field, okay, so but then cops can be disturbing that area as well.
That was the toughest part because we didn't train enough we didn't train enough, period. And again, it comes down to money, allocating resources, et cetera, et cetera. But we really didn't train almost at all with the canines, and we were utilizing them. And more than one cop got bit by the canine because it's like, I'd go over the air or somebody else would go over the air. It's like, okay, canine is here. That means don't run. Because if that dog sees something running, he's going after it.
Yeah.
And sure as shit, on more than one occasion, the cop, for whatever reason, thought it would be a great idea. Then all of a sudden, they got a German Shepherd munching away on their leg. And it's like, no, that's not cool. Don't do that. But yeah,
Uh,
anytime the canines were there, I loved them. I thought they were a great tool. Now where you worked, did the canine go home with you? He was your partner. He was 24/7.
oh yeah, yeah. He's still with me now. He's 9 now. He
Okay.
was retired once they had the legalization of marijuana
I
because
was
they
just going to ask you about that. Yeah.
yeah they train him. We asked. I said, hey, can we just not train him on marijuana because it's really not our focus. It was more heroin
Mm-hmm.
and other illicit drugs. And they said, no, it's Attorney General guidelines. Even though you knew after Colorado, we knew Jersey was going to legalize it at some point.
Sure.
At some point, Jersey was definitely going to legalize it. So we were like, all right, it is what it is. Now, we lost probable cause on the outside of the car because, hey, his dog now hits on a legal substance, but we
Right.
could have still used them for search warrants in places we already had probable cause. But they
Oh,
just,
okay.
yeah, they decided they didn't want to go that route because the overwhelming majority, I guess, or the reason we got them is to gain probable cause with drug dealers that were
Mm-hmm.
running drugs in the vehicles.
So, what do you do with a retired dog? Do you still run them through like scenarios and kind of keep them happy that way?
It's funny you asked that because I hadn't done anything with them in over a year because I hadn't had any drugs around the house. So
Yeah.
what I ended up doing is, and I travel so much because I think a couple of the agencies I train with, they said, yeah, sure, come by if you want, if you're around, but I'm never around when they train. And the legalization of marijuana here, I just went into one of the weed shops about a month ago and bought some weed for him and put it out. And he like lost his mind being able to work again. And
Aw.
speaking about the legalization, I don't know if you're aware in New Jersey, the attorney general had put out months ago, cops could smoke marijuana here. They're not to, so there's
What?
yeah, yeah. That's in New Jersey, the cops can smoke marijuana. I don't know if it's still on the test. And I think once people start pissing hot for it, it's going to become a fucking problem.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, obviously you can't smoke on duty. They had to make sure they put that in there, right?
Yeah. A bunch of
Yeah,
cops token up in the squad car. Hey, yeah, we'll get to that assignment sometime. Or
yeah, but
I'm very hungry.
yeah, it's pretty crazy because the guys I still keep in touch with pretty much everybody. Oh yeah, I smoke now. Like I drink whiskey, and I'm like, okay, like I don't really have a desire for it or anything
Yeah.
anymore. It's not something I would mess with, but I think, and that's what I've talked to a lot of the guys my age or older. Like, I can care less. But some of the younger guys are like, yeah, why not? It's something. It's legal.
Right. It's legal. That's interesting because it stays in your system so much longer than alcohol. Alcohol goes out of your system pretty quick. And if you get into, like, say, a critical incident, you shoot and kill somebody, or you're in a really bad squad accident or something like that, my agency made the officer go to the hospital and pee in a bottle. That was mandatory. You had a drug test. So say you have a copper that was enjoying a doobie. I don't even know if they say doobie anymore. I'm old. Um, after dinner on a Tuesday night, Wednesday morning or afternoon, they get into a car chase, things turn shitty, and they wind up shooting and killing somebody. Well, as a sergeant, one of my duties at these things was escorting said copper to the clinic to go pee in a bottle. And there's gonna be some residue, I would think, in there. I don't know how you would measure that, or you're gonna have to have some kind of guideline.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It came out, like I said, a few months ago. I wish I could bring it up for you real
Yeah,
quick and we can
yeah,
read from it. But it was like, hey, you're not there'll be no restriction of it, because I think it's actually when they made it a law, it's almost, and I could be wrong. I don't even want to speculate too much, but it's almost like they put it in the Constitution that you have a right to or something in New Jersey. It's so fucking weird. They
yeah.
they do so much fucked up.
Constitutional right to get high.
Yeah,
Oh my
it's
God, that's dumb.
whatever
Wow.
it is. Yeah, you got to read up. It's so weird, and I couldn't believe when it came out. They're like, yeah, but then the governor said, oh, he might restrict it, but then there was nothing that ever came of it. But like you said, civilly at least, if you go and you have a critical incident, and it's gonna show up in your piss,
Yeah,
especially if you smoked the day before.
absolutely. So
It's
what's the benchmark with alcohol? It's 0.08 is, legally drunk. You obviously you would have to take blood. So are you going to take blood instead of urine? Would it even show up? Would you be able to measure? You wouldn't be able to measure it as specifically as you would with blood. You have to have blood. And okay, now what are the benchmarks? Yeah, that's a new frontier, really, when you think about it. It's like, okay. And that could differ from agency to agency. You could still have agencies that say, no, you cannot smoke marijuana. You can't do edibles. You can't have THC in your system anytime. Yeah, you could have a cocktail after dinner, but you can't smoke dope.
Well, that's the thing. The attorney general had come out and said the agency's not to punish the officer. So that's what and again, it's guidelines, right? It's not a law. It's attorney
Right.
general guidelines. And in New Jersey, you do not elect your attorney general, you do not elect your judges, you do not elect your prosecutors. They're all politically appointed.
Oh,
Although
okay.
they're unbiased, right?
Yeah,
But
right. Sure
it's
they are.
all it's all politically appointed in our state, which I'll
Wow.
leave it at that when it comes
Yeah.
to what goes on here. But it's one of those things like there's no, like you just asked a lot of questions. Well, what about this? What about that? They're not saying it, giving answers for any of that. So when something does happen, what are they going to do? Now, I've heard it's been taken off the piss test. I've heard it's still on the piss test. But if you do piss hot for it, what are they going to do when the attorney general says you could smoke it and they're not to be punished? Because that's what I thought at first. So you said this agency, you think they would give them the authority to say, well, we don't want our cops smoking weed here, but they've taken that away.
Wow. I've got a funny quick story for you. I was a copper on late shift way back in the day, and there was a cop that we suspected was a bit of a stoner. He had all the classic signs, and his wife or girlfriend that he was living with, he pissed her off. I don't know if he was caught cheating or what the deal was. Never piss off your girlfriend or your wife. That's bad things are going to happen. So what she does is she calls internal affairs. So he comes into work at midnight, and Sarge gives him the random drug screen. Is like, okay, go report to the hospital. And he looks at all of us. He's like, shit. It's like, oh boy. So I looked at, roll calls over. I'm like, all right, well, you have fun with that. And he looks at me and says, I'm not going to pass this shit. And I'm like, we kind of all suspected that. And I'm like, well, you got to give it a try. Who knows? Maybe something will happen with the test or whatever. You got to try. He's like, yeah. So we get a call at the front desk from somebody saying, I'm not sure if my mind's playing tricks with me or what, but there was a police officer in a squad car with the windows down, and I think he was smoking a marijuana cigarette. This dude was token up on his way to the drug test. Yeah. The
Oh
nurse called and
man.
said, "This guy smells like you just got done partying with Cheech and Chong, and he's in uniform with a gun, and he's driving around in a squad car." So he got
Wow.
the kibosh immediately. So word of the wise, kids: don't just say no.
Yeah.
If you got a gun and a uniform, don't do it. Oh, so you're on the canines. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of training, but it's also very rewarding. You're doing something that a lot of people want to do. And what happens from there?
So I finished out my career at 12 years. I took an early retirement in order to do classes on nonverbal communication, body language, and facial expressions. I'm skipping ahead here. So
Yeah,
I'd been in the special investigations for a while, and I was reading a lot of psychology books at the time, just to up my interview skills, figure out why people do what they do, say what they say. And
yeah.
one of these books I read talked about this Dr. Ekman, who had discovered these 7 universal emotions that showed up in the face. He created this facial action coding system, and they were using this stuff to assist in detecting deception. And I'm like, oh, I got to go find this stuff. There's probably really good training out there for this for law enforcement. And I couldn't find anything. So I looked into civilian training. I went over to Europe. Not only did I get trained, I got licensed to bring the stuff back. Then I went further into nonverbal communication. I got certified with this Biolanguage Institute down in Virginia. And I started doing classes with law enforcement, not just on the facial expressions, but also body language.
Okay. So yeah, that was my next question was, where did you get the interest in the nonverbal communication? And you just told me.
Yeah.
Yeah, some call it deceit recognition. There's different, and why study it? You just told me. Uh, so what was the cusp? What happened, or what was the deciding factor in saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to take this early retirement, which financially is a bit of a gamble because, obviously you don't get as big of a pension. You probably can't collect on it until you hit a certain age, I'm guessing.
Correct. I don't collect till I'm 55, and it is a lesser amount. So it was a gamble, like anything else in life. It's also a gamble to work in New Jersey, where you
Yeah,
never know what's going to happen if you do the
true.
right thing. So
Right.
there was a lot of reforms coming in, many of which I was shocked by. I'll give you one example. You weren't allowed to chase any stolen cars. Now, I understand
Ugh.
certain agencies putting that into policy, but the state to say, are really rural counties like Salem County or Sussex
Oh, the
County.
entire state said that?
Yeah, the entire state. No, the attorney general came out.
Wow.
The reform was no chasing cars until in April. So this came out in January this year, 2022. April, it was spiked. I mean, it was through the roof,
Oh,
insane.
yeah.
And they said, okay, you can go chase cars again. But if you're a cop in Jersey, you're going to really think, okay, are they going to hang me after an incident happens, if someone crashes, or it's just the between the reforms and the fact that I was getting traveling around the country, doing the courses and enjoying that
Sure.
even more, that I had to make that decision, and I took the gamble. And so far, it's worked out. You never know what the future is going to bring,
Right.
but it's worked out so far. And I could, and I talked over my family. If I go back to becoming go back into law enforcement, it won't be in the state of New Jersey. I
Okay.
would do it in a more police friendly state, maybe your Florida, your Texas, which
Sure.
I love the great state of Texas, maybe down there, but
Okay.
not New Jersey. More with the reforms. It's just some of them. When you go through, it's just some of them blow your mind. You're like, where do they come up with this stuff?
Well, it's interesting you say that because it also goes by the chief. We had a chief that what changed his mind was squad cameras. We were very late in the game to get squad cameras and body cameras, very late, compared to the rest of the nation. And again, it comes down to money. It's like, okay, the cars that we have all have over 100,000 miles. You're lucky if it has like tires that aren't balder than me and really bad brakes. It's embarrassing how shitty our fleet was. And he beefed it up a bit, but okay, now we have squad cameras. And it's like, okay, and you're looking at these chases and it's like, holy shit. Now, citizens are seeing these chases. They're like, holy shit. And it also monitors how fast the squad car is going and if the copper is even touching the brakes.
Yeah.
So in an urban environment where especially during the day, not so much at night where traffic is pretty light. You know, they're very scary
Yeah.
and the optics are terrible. And as anybody who knows anything about film or cameras or whatever, when you're looking at something through one lens, you're not seeing the entire picture. You know, it's they can play tricks on you, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So the chief came out and he says, okay, we're only going to chase if it's a violent felony that is in the commission of a violent felony. So it's like, okay, so, you know, there's a shooting that you come upon. Yeah, you could chase this guy. If this guy is wanted for a shooting, you can't chase him.
Mm.
Okay. So misdemeanors, you know, car thieves. Yeah. Well, the first year that he enacted this, fatal traffic accidents went up 400%.
Wow.
You know, there was byproducts that he wasn't counting on.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden it's like, oh, you know, innocent people that are like truly innocent are becoming real victims of these assholes that, you know, red light, what does that mean? You know, I don't have to stop for that shit because nobody's going to chase me. Yeah, you can put your little lights on and your siren, but I'm not going to pull over. You have to go the speed limit. It became ridiculous. So long story short, it keeps on getting amended, and it's by political. It's the winds of the politics.
Mm.
It's and you know the whims of the mayor, the political winds, whichever way they're blowing. You know, it goes back and forth. You know, and then you would have cops that would sometimes go outside of policy because they really wanted to get the bad guy. Yeah, there's always a way around. Cops will always figure that out, always. And it's like, really, is it worth it? Is it worth your job? Because if this goes south, you're done. There's you're just done. You know,
Yeah.
so you know, especially like the younger guys, and even some of the older guys like me, you know, they just didn't understand that. I'm like, not worth your pension, not worth your job. You know,
Mm.
it's but anyways, that's enough of that. So you start going off to this different career path. At first, you were working for somebody, right? Before you, or were you by yourself first?
I was by myself first. I had a training company, One Face LLC. So I was training. I did it for about 2.5 years before I joined up with street cop training. The owner was my partner in patrol over a
Oh,
decade ago. Yeah. So
okay.
he was like, "Oh, why don't you come over here?" It's one of the larger companies right now in the US. I think he's over 40 instructors right now, maybe even more. He might even be closer to 50.
Okay. Now, is this, you know, I could see it totally being geared towards law enforcement, but do you like give presentations or classes to non-law enforcement?
Yeah, I was working for Joe Navarro's body language program. I was subcontracted through that. It's if you're not familiar with Joe Navarro, if you read a body language book, that's probably the one you read. Was
Okay.
one of his "What Everybody Is Saying." It's translated. I don't even know how many languages. And he had an online program, and some of the people I met from Europe, I started collaborating with them, or they reached out to me and asked me if I would do this mentorship. When people took the program from
Mm,
around the world, they talked to me 4 times. So I have done with civilians. I'm actually working on something for next couple months, doing more towards the civilian side as well. But it's not. It's good to get different perspectives and deal with different people from different industries.
sure.
But it's so much, having been a cop, it's just so much easier going in front of a bunch of cops and just talking because they know what I've been through, I know what you've been through, generally speaking, the type of work you've done, and I can curse and say what needs to be said, and there's never any, oh my god, he said the fuck word, it's
Yeah,
like,
right, right. Yeah, yeah, I can totally see that. You know, I read your book, you know, Beware the Body, which I highly recommend. I got the audio book because that's mostly how I consume my books is audio. It was really good. And instantly the book, Gavin DeBecker's The Gift of Fear popped into my head. I think those two books complement each other really well. So if you've read, you know, Gavin DeBecker's The Gift of Fear is a very popular book. You know, it's I don't know how many copies he's sold. If you like that book, you're gonna like Beware the Body. I really believe that.
oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a book that I've always found, just that they put in the words, the intuition, and being able to articulate your intuition. You might not be able to at the time,
Right.
which I tried to do with Beware the Body. You say, okay, this is what I'm seeing. I can articulate to myself, this is why I feel this way. And you're not always going to be able to do that. Have you read Left of Bang by the two Marine Corps officers?
Mm-mm.
That's one that's very similar to Gift of Fear as well,
Okay.
but in a military context. But if the general public could get some out of it as well, it's pretty much you say, okay, well, you've got bang here. This would be, let's say, an IED going off for an attack. Left of bang is what's happening before that attack, before that bang. What is giving you that intuition? What are you not realizing? So, for instance, if you're in Iraq and you go into a small neighborhood where every day there's kids out there playing, there's always people around. You go in there one day, there's nobody there. Well, and you start getting a feeling something's not right. Well, why is that? Because the people in that village neighborhood might realize, oh, someone planted an IED in that area. Same thing if you're in a neighborhood in the US where you usually see people outside or you don't see a car parked a certain way. You know, just those things where something's off and you're able to say to yourself, well, something's not right here. But can you articulate what it is?
Right. You know, in The Gift of Fear, he says that humans are the only species that go against their grain of intuition. We all have intuition, but we're the only ones out of the animal kingdom that be like, nah, this really isn't happening to me. That guy, he's giving me all the clues that he is about to rob me, but he seems like a nice guy. Or, I saw a TV show last night and he kind of looked like this guy that's a comedian that I kind of like, just you're rationalizing things instead of just going with your gut feelings and saying, okay, this could turn really shitty really quick. Maybe I'll avoid this situation. It is amazing, and when you read these books, you're like, yeah, totally 100%.
Oh yeah. And you step back and you say, well, is it worth being polite to get injured or have your life day? It's just, you pull up at a gas station in the middle of the night and one of the 49 states where you're allowed to pump your own gas because you're not in Jersey. So you get out of your car, you got someone milling around, looking over their shoulder, and they're looking towards you a little bit. Well, are you going to decide to, okay, I'm definitely going to, get back in your car and go pump your gas somewhere else. Or if you're capable, I'd be locked in on that person. Like, oh, it's just a person wandering around waiting for a friend to show up. No, there's a reason why that person's milling around at 11 at night in the Circle K parking lot.
Yeah. This is totally off topic, but I was in Boston and I was outside of Boston going to a gym and I stopped for gas. It was, a service station. And before I stopped, I did like a lap and I'm like looking because I didn't know the neighborhood very well. And it was it wasn't run down or anything, but I'm like, well, whatever. And this guy is just kind of like moping around there. And I'm like, well, what the hell? So, he's putting gas in this girl's car. And I'm like, is that like a homeless thing where they're cleaning your windshields? They pump your gas? Yeah. Like, what the hell? So I thought, what the hell? So I go in there and I jump out of the car and he's like, no, sir. He says, I'll do it. And I'm like, who are you? And he says, well, I work here. It's the law. If you have a service station, you have to pump the gas for the customer. If you have like a garage attached to the gas station, you got to pump the gas.
Huh.
So I don't know if I was outside of Boston, I wasn't like in the city, but I'm just like, wow, this is weird. And I'm like, this brings me back to when I was a kid, when there was gas station attendants that would check your air pressure and, clean your windshield and check the oil. I mean, I was like a little kid when that stuff was going on. And gas was 25 cents a gallon.
That's in New Jersey. I don't know. It's illegal to pump your own gas. And we're the only state left in the country. Oregon repealed it, I want to say like 10 years ago. So you still, if you go in New Jersey, someone's pumping your gas. But, Boston, I could see something like you said, if they had a garage attached.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, I mean, Massachusetts got some crazy laws. I don't know. You
Okay.
go there, you can't buy doubles. You go, hey, let me double Jameson on the rocks. You're like, sorry, we can't. That's illegal. Happy
Really?
hours, yeah, happy hours are illegal.
What?
And yeah, on the
Wait a second. What are all these Irish people saying in Boston? But I didn't even see any Irish people in Boston when I was there. I'm like, I was all excited. I'm like, okay, I'm the only Irish guy in this bar. Something is weird.
I said that to one of the chiefs that has me up in Berlin, Massachusetts. I go, I always thought of Massachusetts as being like all Irish. She's like, no, we got, because there's a huge Portuguese population,
Yeah, yeah, yep.
a huge Italian population in certain areas too. And I'm just,
Yes.
from being down here, you always think Boston and Massachusetts being all Irish, right? Like it's
Yeah, that's what I thought.
yeah,
I
yeah.
was wrong. I was wrong. So as far as nonverbal communication, body language, yeah, the term microfacial expressions come up. Could you kind of go over that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Microfacial expression that occurs in about 1/25th to 1/2 second. So there's also, you've got a macrofacial expression. That's when all the elements last for more than a micro expression. Could be a second, could be two, could
Sure.
be longer. For the most part, you're able to tell, okay, that person looks angry, they look sad. The microfacial expression, with training, they found that you can pick up on these pretty. Some people have better intuition. I shouldn't use the word intuition. It's a better, what's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, they're more skilled at catching it.
Yeah, that's, I bet you phrase it better than any word I'm looking for right
Yeah.
now. Yeah, there are people that are better than this than others, because when I have my class, I show a test and you look at 14 microfacial expressions. The overwhelming majority will get 7 or less correct, but I get people in class that get 10, 11, 12 right off the bat. They
Hmm.
just have that better intuition. I don't know, I'm using the word intuition again,
Yeah, but
but
I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, they're better skill level at looking at these facial expressions. Somebody take it 2 more times, overwhelming majority improve. What you do is you break down the actual elements, because even when you say, hey, that person has an angry face, well, what does that mean? Usually you'll have the eyebrows pulled down, both eyelids being pulled up, the mouth can be tight, lip margins can disappear, like the lips rolling in and a disappearance of the lips,
Yeah.
and you can have the chin thrust forward slightly. You can also have the baring of the teeth at that time. And I bring up, might be something you want to put in your reports. I'm not a report writing instructor, but as opposed to that person became angry, what does that mean? Then you also have subtle expressions. What do I mean by that? Also known as mini expressions. They're partial movements in the face. So with anger, maybe just the eyebrows dropping down, maybe just the lips disappearing. But you always have to take things into context, because sometimes eyebrows go down in concern. They also go down when they show disgust. So there's a lot of things to take into play. But if you're reading someone, you pick up on certain changes in baseline behavior. Like, that's interesting. Why did I pick this up at this time after I've asked a question?
What are the drawbacks to studying this kind of thing, trying to make it as practical as possible for, like, a street cop or a detective that's, questioning somebody?
The thing is, when you leave the class, or if you go over it, for a day studying,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to pick apart certain things. This is why I put stuff on Facebook group for law enforcement as well, because it's one of those things you need to be reminded of it. You're going
Sure.
to have to, you, as far as a drawback, a setback is, you're not going to be able to learn everything 100% within a day. You're going to get a good sense of everything, and you're going to walk away remembering things like watching lips disappear, paying attention to the face, and practice reading the face when I'm talking to someone, one lip corner being pulled back up and possible contempt. But just like anything else we learn in law enforcement, you go to a full day class, there's going to be certain elements you're going to remember, and be certain elements you're going to remember, and there's going to be certain things that you don't remember, and you
Oh,
have to
absolutely.
practice.
It's funny because I took a course called Eyes for Lies, and we talked about that when we had a beer. And what really stuck out in my head were the videos that she was showing of OJ, Bill Clinton, all these Susan Smith that drove her kids into a lake and lied about it, and just the micro expressions on their faces when they were lying. Like, Susan Smith was like smiling when
Yeah.
she's trying to force not to smile. And OJ, he was guilty as hell. Bill Clinton, obviously very bold-faced lying on TV, and just the micro expressions. But my thought was, that's all well and good, but I don't have a pause button when I'm talking to somebody. I don't have a slow motion I mean, yeah, later on, if you're videoing them, if you're recording them, yeah, you can analyze it. And it's like, oh shit, I missed those things. But in real time, that's kind of hard. How do you overcome that?
Well, you're going to miss things. That's 100%. And that's when, with all of body language, if I'm looking at your feet, what your feet are doing, I'm going to miss something in your face. I want to pick up on as much as possible. And like you said, to be able to watch a video back, you're going to be like, wow, I pull all this stuff in.
Yeah.
That's one of the things where there's different thoughts on what's the most useful thing to pick up on with facial expressions. And Dr. Ekman, who along with his colleagues started this facial action coding system back in the 60s, talks about the microfacial expressions during one interview, says the most useful thing to assist you in detecting deception. And there's another guy, Matsumoto, who's out of California, and he says, the subtle expression, those mini, because just the lips disappearing, just the eyebrows going up and in, those partial movements that aren't happening as quick, those as the micros, or you're going to pick up on a lot more. And they can lean you. If I ask you, I say, hey, Pat, where are you coming from right now? Your lips disappear. So I'm coming from the bookstore. Oh, okay. We start talking for another 15 minutes. I go, hey, where'd you say you're coming from again? Lips disappear again, or maybe some other behavior I see, grabbing in the neck, maybe possible discomfort, maybe a shoulder shrug and possible uncertainty. Well, now I'm definitely going to ask more questions. Well, which bookstore was it? Or maybe you came from the bar. You don't want to tell me you came from the bar, right?
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah. It's a little early for that, but I never counted out. I worked night shift for a long time. So, okay. What stuck in my head, and it's any kind of training, it's like you have an instructor up there for 8 hours giving you all kinds of training, and you walk away and you remember a couple of things. Yeah, it's human nature. Yep. And what I remembered the most was she was playing back these videos of people saying no while they're shaking their head yes. And and then the next day at work, I'm talking to some kid that had a gun, he was hiding a gun, blah blah blah, and I'm using this, and I'm like, oh my god, you're lying so bad. And finally it was like a 16-year-old girl, and then she just started bawling. Oh, the guns, and I'm like, hey, this shit works. I actually used it the next day, literally. And I'm like, this is some cool ass stuff.
Oh yeah, I go over that in the class as well. The up yes in our culture, meaning yes and affirmation and no negation, and the verbal nonverbal connect. But it's actually not like that in all cultures. There's cultures out there that have the opposite. Like the Bulgarians. The Bulgarians will go, it's hard for me to even do. I know we're talking because up and down for no and left to right for yes.
Right. It's hard to not do that. You'd have to be pretty trained, I think. Now, as far as, reading people and doing these classes, do you get much pushback from the people in the classes? Cops are a tough act, man. You said you enjoyed teaching cops. I could see it, whereas like the camaraderie and you can be yourself, and, and if an F-bomb flies, so be it, whatever. It's not the end of the world compared to corporate America. But we're also the most suspicious and the first ones to say that's bullshit. This is voodoo, hokey bullshit. What do you say to that?
I've never heard that in a class. And I think because it's hard for me to go over something in 5 minutes to say, hey, the totality of the circumstance, really break everything down so you get a full understanding. You've been to a class on facial expressions, so you understand what I mean. So in a class, I've never had any pushback from anybody, either in like, hey, well, I think this is bullshit. Never had that out in public, never had anybody come to me on the side. However, you will get it. When I get the most pushback, when I bring up anything in nonverbal communication, if I put something online, like in my Facebook group or one of the street cop Facebook groups, where I put something up to say, hey, take a look at this. You often see people, for example, one of the things I put up, there's a woman holding onto her collar, both sides like this. I know people can't see this, but balling her fingers around the collar of her shirt. She had a collared shirt on towards the neck. And I wrote in, you will often see people when they're uncomfortable go protecting the neck area. Now, that's not 100%, and everything has to be taken into context. So then I get all these comments. That's how I stand with my vest. You're telling me I'm uncomfortable. But your vest, you need to, take a step back. What is your vest? It's a hard shelled exterior that you can hold on to and it becomes comfortable. If you're grabbing a shirt, you're likely to stretch out that shirt. It's not something that people will do. Now, someone could have a baseline behavior. It's something they do. But if I bring up a specific topic, I've been talking to you for 30 minutes, I hit on something that might be a little touchy, and you go like this, well, there's a good chance that you're uncomfortable. But everyone starts this and that. Oh, this means this. And, it's, you get a lot of people when I'm in class, I don't have that issue because I can explain anything.
Oh, okay.
But because I put something down for one thing, I'm expecting people to understand that, yes, nothing is 100%. It has to be taken into context. So I'm not going to write out 4 paragraphs for people, right? Like you've read my book, everything is explained in there, but I'm not going to write 4 paragraphs out because what's going to happen? Oh, okay, picture. I'm not reading all this. Next thing on social media.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting because it's something that we didn't do a ton of training. And, if you became a detective, most people would go to the Reed, like interrogation, school, and they do go through some body language stuff with Reed. That was kind of the gold standard. And talking to some detectives that were teaching interrogation and interview like skills. Yeah, like one guy's like, that's bullshit. That's complete bullshit. And I'm just like, half an hour ago we're talking about you getting a confession from somebody, and some of it's the proximity your body is to them, what their body is doing, etc. So is it bullshit? No. Again, it's context. It's the totality of the circumstances, as we used to say in the biz. So let me ask you this. I know you're married and you have kids. How does that work? Yeah. You got kids, and it's like, I know you're lying, Johnny.
It's funny. Well, I actually bring up in the class with my younger daughter. I'll be like, why'd you hit your sister? And I just get a shoulder shrug and uncertainty. She pretty much lawyers up on me. I can't even ask any questions. It's like she just shuts down. So
smart kid.
Yeah. So she's pretty smart about things. If she just shoulder shrugs, I'm not answering any questions. It's one of those things, I don't want to say you turn it off because I always equate it to reading license plates. If you ever worked patrol, there's those times you've been driving, you're not working, and you're so used to reading license plates that you pick up on it and you end up reading the plate out in front of you phonetically. Whereas, you could be talking to a family member. I bring something up and I see the inner corners of the eyebrows go up, or I see the uncertainty shoulder shrug, that possible uncertainty with the shoulder shrug. And it's, well, I didn't want to see that. I wasn't trying to read the person, but something pops up. If you're doing it all the time, are you going to completely turn it off? Probably not.
Yeah. It's funny because I came from that class and I think I was either newly married or I was dating my present wife, and she had a teenage daughter, and they were both watching the Bachelor or Bachelorette. And I'm just going up to the screen. I'm like, he is lying. She is such a bad liar. Oh my God, this show sucks. And and her daughter was like 15 or 16. She's like, you're ruining it for me. Stop doing that stuff. And I'm like, all right, sorry. I'll be quiet now. But yeah, that was kind of funny. Now, some examples of, like reading body language, some of the stuff that is common or commoner that you hear about is like, okay, folding the arms in front of the body. What does that say?
Well, that could mean many things. That's the issue because there's too many people out there, I would say experts, and I'm doing the air quotes here, that are saying, well, this means this or that means that. Nothing's 100%, and things have to be taken into context. So the arms folded in front of the body. It could be that someone's in a power pose. It could be that they're shy, timid, standoffish. They're using that as a psychological barrier. Could also be a self-hug. Or if you got someone out in your area of the country in the northern Midwest in the winter,
cold.
They're wearing a t-shirt outside, they could be trying to keep in body warmth. So nothing is 100%, nothing's absolute or definitive. Everything could have several different meanings, or it could be no meaning at all. Could be that, hey, guess what? I just happen to be standing that way. And I myself have an overactive muscle in my upper shoulder area. So I'll often do that to stretch the muscle out.
Sure. So how about smiling inappropriately?
Well, that could be a couple things. You talked about Susan Smith before.
Yeah.
And you see that's possible duping delight. Duping delight being that someone is lying to you and they think they're getting over on you and they take pleasure in that. You also see, if you look up Diane Downs, who shot her 3 children and herself in the arm in the 80s trying to kill them. Wow. Then there's also something known as narcissistic glee. Narcissistic glee being you have a narcissistic personality, and you're getting attention, could be negative attention, but you're enjoying it just because you're getting the attention, such as the person that's been found guilty in a courtroom of murder, and the sentencing phase is occurring, and a family member goes up and starts talking about how terrible that person has made their life. And they're
Sure.
looking at the defendant and they start to smile. They're enjoying that negative.
You know what? I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. See that, and it could also be like, well, people just will do it when they're uncomfortable. Sometimes we get people
Well,
that
I
smile and
always
laugh.
thought it's like, what an asshole. You know, it's like,
Oh,
holy
yeah.
shit, you are the biggest dick of all dicks. You know, it's
Oh,
like,
for the defendant
yeah,
like that.
yeah, absolutely. Oh, wow. You know, people talk about the eyes. You know, it's like he isn't looking me in the eye, or the eyes are the window to the soul. What's your views on that?
So this has been something that's gone on for centuries. They have an
Yep.
ancient Indian Sanskrit where they have a picture of a liar, and the guy was looking down away to the left or to the right. And they even did a study. They surveyed people. Texas Christian University send out a survey to 2,500 people and asked, do you believe that liars keep more or less eye contact when they're lying? And 70% of those surveyed said they believe liars keep less eye contact. Now,
Mhm.
if you're part of that 70% and I'm going to lie to you, what am I going to do? I'm going to give you more eye contact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And there's been studies that have found also, and they're limited studies, that people will give more eye contact with their lying. I'm still going to go off a baseline. If you've been looking away from me and then all of a sudden I grabbed your attention, when did that occur? If you've been looking at me and all of a sudden now you're looking away, we keep eye contact in North America 40 to 60% of the time. You know, and what those are numbers they come up with. What does that even mean? I mean, half of 40 and 60 is 50%. So I don't,
Right.
you know, usually a lot of people, overwhelming majority, will look at you when you're speaking, and then when they're speaking, they'll look away a little bit to think about what they're going to say. And everybody's an individual. So I'm going to baseline the behavior. I'm not going to say, oh, they've been looking away a lot, because there's also cultural differences. You know, I got a sister-in-law who's Korean. She said, you know, her parents were scolding her. They're authority figures. She wouldn't look them in the eye. It's considered defiance. I myself, half Irish, half Sicilian kid growing up in Jersey. My father was yelling at me and I looked away. I was considered I was being rude. Couldn't even bother to look at him. So he'd be like, you fucking look at me when I'm talking to you. Right?
Yeah, it sounds familiar. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my. So, you know, but I think the baseline thing is something that people really miss with, you know, not people. Well, yeah, there were people, but like, say, Hollywood, you know, whatever, you know, you see the dramatic, you know, interrogation scene or interview with the bad guy, and they're starting out as like, I know you kill, you know, they don't even build a rapport with the person first. You know, it's like, or even attempt to build a rapport with this guy. You know, it's like where I worked, you know, it's like we had a thing called a pedigree, where it's like, okay, where were you born? You know, where did you go to school? Who are your emergency contacts and all that? You're not reading, you know, the Miranda rights right away, because you're not asking self-implication, you know, questions. And then it's like, okay, well, now it's time. It's like, okay, now we're going to talk about what happened tonight. You know, but first I have to read you, you know, the statement that you pull out of your memo book or your hat or wherever you got it, or your
Yeah.
ID, and you read it verbatim. And now it's not cold. You know, it's like on TV, you see, you know, they're reading people their Mirandas before they even have the fucking handcuffs on somebody. And I'm like, what? Do you not want them to talk to you? You know, it's like you're more or less begging them not to make a statement, and you're not building up any kind of rapport. And some of the best interrogators I've ever watched do an interrogation on somebody. You know, they could sell, you know, ice cream in Alaska, you know, ice cubes in Alaska, you know, sand in the desert, you know, whatever. And they never started out like that. And it took a long time. And I think they were even doing that subconsciously as far as the baseline stuff, because, you know, a lot of times in law enforcement, it's like cop intuition. It's like, how did you know that situation was going to go to shit so fast? And sometimes you think back on it, it's like, how did I know? You know, or whatever. But this person is giving you clues, nonverbal, you know, communication kind of clues, and you're picking up on it, but you're not saying, he's balling his fists, he's displaying resistive tension, you know, whatever. You're just like, oh shit, it's go time now. You know, something bad's going to happen really soon.
Yeah. And that's, I just got to go back when you brought up the word pedigree, because
Yeah.
I was taught pedigree information as well in my academy, and there are cops that have all been taught the pedigree information.
Yep.
That's not something that I was surprised around the country that is used. And I just brought this up in Texas. They're like, pedigree. What? I'm like, you guys don't use that term either. And I think it's an older term that's been phased out. Because I
Okay.
guess pedigree, you think of like a dog, but we were always
Yeah,
taught,
I
hey,
guess that's true.
right? Did you get the
Yeah.
pedigree info? Name, date of birth,
Yep.
social, address. And it's funny to me that it's been phased out, that I bring it up and the cops are like, pedigree, what are you talking about?
Yeah, you know what it does is, if you're doing a pedigree on somebody, a lot of times your suspect might become a victim later. A lot of times, most of the homicides that in Milwaukee now I think we already broke the record, like the record. We're like over 200 now in a city of 600,000. And a lot of those, not all, but a lot of them are people who are engaging in illegal activities and they get killed. They're victimizing somebody, and a month ago they were the victim. Dope transactions, whatever the case may be. But there's a lot of illegal stuff. So you get shot and killed, and we're having a trouble finding next of kin. They just look up an old pedigree. Oh yeah, that mom lives at. Here's their phone number. It makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Or if you're going back and trying to retrace some stuff, and it's like, well, he did work here 6 months ago. I could talk to his boss, and you're trying to find him, or his girlfriend was his baby mama, whatever. It helps connect the dots, and I think it's silly not to do a pedigree, but hey, that's just me.
Yeah.
That's just me. All right. Let's see here. We met for a drink back in October. When you first saw me, were you eyeing me up? Like, were you reading my body language?
No, not that
No.
I remember. Not that I remember. You brought me a
Okay.
cigar, so you put me in a very good mood, and we were drinking. So,
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that. All right, let's go over to the Facebook questions because we have a few of those over there. Let me take a peek.
okay.
All right. Joan Raymond asks, can people control their emotions enough to lie with little to no detection?
Yes. Yeah, there's people out there that they're going to be excellent liars. And you're just not going to be able to pick up on everything. It's one of those things that deception detection is not an A plus B equals C. It's an art and a craft. And there are going to be people that are very good liars, and you're just not going to be able to pick up on them.
Okay. John Arnez. He says, remember, the most important part of this, do not use these skills inside family relationships. Need to switch it off when dealing with loved ones.
As much as possible.
You're right. So Flea Nelson Smith to John, I could always tell when my son was lying by his eyebrows. They would raise right up. Then Claudia Van Gee says, my husband has a lazy eye. When he lied, that eye shifted a bit too much. Busted. You ever deal with that?
No.
You know what? I've seen it with people who are intoxicated. If you have a lazy, quote unquote lazy eye, if you're drinking, it's going to be a whole lot more lazy. Oh. It's very interesting to see. All right, Flea Nelson Smith asks, what about compulsive liars? They seem to lie about everything, whether important or not. People usually find out about these only after knowing them for a while, but can it be apparent right away?
Well, every situation is different. It could be apparent right away. You'd have to actually take that situation. I'd have to see the situation, or you'd have to see the situation to give a blanket statement on a compulsive liar. I would also need a good definition. What exactly is the compulsive liar? Is it the good liar, the person that lies all the time? There's people that we know, friends with, family, that yes, you pick up, the verifiable facts, and they're off from what the person's saying. That's another thing. At the end of the day, when you're dealing with somebody, we're using this as a tool.
Right.
You're not going to say, oh, they flashed anger at this point when I brought up someone's name. They must not like them. No, maybe they're mad at themselves for something they did to them. Or maybe you're mad that you brought up the name. Or maybe they're thinking about something else that happened when that name got brought up. We can't say A plus B equals C when it comes to detecting deception. Is a tool. At the end of the day, we're looking for those verifiable facts and confessions.
Yeah, nobody's getting the needle because Sean said so, because somebody looked down at their feet or something like that. Yeah. Annika Melinda Kalulu asks, What does it take for someone to be an excellent liar in your experience? In the rare cases when you were wrong about someone telling the truth, what deceived you into believing them?
Someone being quick on their feet, having quick answers, because you could have your story, and that's another part. They got to have the story straight. But when you're asked a question that they didn't prepare for, if you're quick enough on your feet to be able to answer that with a logical, rational answer that can make sense, well, that can throw people off.
Right. And what I have seen is if you start messing with the time frame, you have them go through, it's like, well, yeah, I went to the gas station, I grabbed some Twinkies and a Coke, and then I went home and did X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, let's start from the other direction. Let's start from the last thing you remember and go backwards. It's hard to lie going backwards.
Yeah, because they haven't rehearsed that. They
Correct.
rehearsed it the one way.
Exactly.
Yep.
All right, Lily Gibson, how accurate is body language reading by itself? I could see how an innocent person with social anxiety could look guilty with their no eye contact, shifty, heavy breathing, heart beating out of their chest, while a sociopath could just get done murdering somebody and seem calm and relaxed in comparison.
Yes, that's the importance of the baseline behavior.
Yeah.
I myself, and even the change in baseline does not, again, indicative that someone's deceptive. I might spend a little bit more time with someone like myself when I get accused of something. I will often perform a hard swallow. And what is that? I kind of feel like I have an excessive amount of saliva in my mouth and it's going to foam out and I have to swallow. So if I'm doing this, I'm talking to somebody, it probably appears, oh, this person looks guilty. I'm not guilty. I'm just stressed out. I'm dealing with something unsavory that causes me to have this reaction. So the thing is, if I'm talking to you for 30 minutes, I've noticed nothing like that, and I've accused you of other things, but then I accuse you of one specific instance, and you start to perform that behavior, well, then I need to ask more questions when I saw that change in baseline.
Gotcha. Dan Petrozzini asks, how does he deal with people who are trained, or quotes, to avoid detection using tools like biofeedback?
I'm not familiar with dealing anyone that have had that training. That's
okay.
I've just not something that I've come across, or at least knowingly come across.
Biofeedback, maybe that's again just like reading people's body language, I would assume. So somebody that's good at reading body language, then you're an expert. So it's two experts going at it. That would be difficult.
And it's still difficult to even control yourself. It's if I'm trying to lie and the stakes are high, am I going to be able? I could try as much as I want to maintain an open body posture, but at some point it might be so caught up in the situation and the conversation that I change that baseline change my baseline at some point.
Gotcha. Author Gail Hulnick asks, are the eyes the most important to watch, or are there other facial aspects equally revealing? Do the cues ever contradict each other? I like that one. Do the cues ever contradict each other?
I'm sure at points they do, and I wouldn't say the eyes are the most telling, although we always hear that. Now, yeah, I'm going to watch people's eyes, but there's other things such as shoulder shrugs for possible uncertainty. It's not the only time shoulders shrug. People do that in restrained excitement. Well, also, I'm going to pay attention to people I brought up before, grabbing the neck, and I like rapid nose inhales too. Just like that. You see that people do that a lot before they lie. But when they hear something they don't like, on top of that, people could have the sniffles, right? They could have sinus issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we got to baseline the behavior. It's not the only thing. And certain things with the eyes, they talk about pupils. Pupils are raised when people are aroused emotionally.
Right.
But it's so small. Am I going to pick up on that? You've seen my eyes, but I got shit brown eyes. You can't even see my pupils.
Okay. NY Seeley author asks, how can you distinguish between someone who is lying versus someone who is nervous or perhaps neuroatypical?
That's a loaded question, because that's one of those things that, if you're dealing with somebody as a cop and you're speaking to them, a lot of times you'll see they're going to be shaking nervously right off the bat, and then they settle down. But just because the person settled down, they could have a neurological issue. So I don't know if you can distinctly 100% definitively say there is a difference that I could define.
Right.
Absolutely.
Totality of the circumstances, kids.
Exactly.
All right. Well, you know what? I think this is a good place for us to end. Boy, we've been going for about an hour and that went fast. Holy cow.
Yeah, it did.
All right. Well, tell you what, Sean, where can people learn more about you and your work? Where can they go?
You can go on, if you're law enforcement, you can go Sean Grogan's Body Language for LEOs on a Facebook group and Facebook. You could also go on Instagram, Sean Grogan's Body Language, and that is also open to the public. And I post things on there pretty often, stories, not just where I'm traveling. I'll put up a picture or something so you can be like, oh, I remember seeing this if you went to the class or if you've done training in the past somewhere else. And also if there's a fight for pre-attack indicators, I'll break that down sometimes. Just a couple things. Oh, I saw this for 20 seconds. I need to remember to look at that if someone approaches me out on the street.
Very good. Now, do you have a website that has all this connected?
Yes. If you go on onefacetraining.com, that's ONEFACETRAINING. Again, onefacetraining.com. And I'm going to be opening up, I think in March, I'm going to try to do my first live webinar to the general public.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Yeah, let us know about that.
All right.
That would be very cool. All right. Well, thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me, Pat. Definitely.
Okay. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.